Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. We are so thankful for the opportunity to be able to contribute to what God is doing in and through you as He has called you into the marketplace. We are privileged to be able to be a part of serving you, and so thankful for the opportunity to do that today. And as a part of that, we are thankful for the opportunity to connect you together and to be able to have you get to know the others that are a part of this webinar series and a part of the FCCI family. And so if you would, please do introduce yourself in the chat, in the comments. We would love for you to be able to share who you are, where you're coming from, and the opportunity to get to know others and continue to build the kingdom together as we serve Christ in that way. Well, if you haven't recently, I would love to encourage you to take a look at our podcast series, as I mentioned earlier, that we are thrilled to be able to deliver to you on a weekly basis. These series come out of many of the talks that have been given at FCCI events, our international conference, and we are thankful for the voices that speak into what it means to truly operate a business for God's purposes, to have a platform of ministry to accomplish His purposes in the world today. So if you haven't taken a look at that recently, please do. Leading a large company for Christ, Is It Even Possible? Was a recent episode from Pat Gelsinger, CEO of Intel, who spoke at an FCCI conference many years ago. Smashing Silos, a recent podcast episode from Ross Allen Hill, who had launched Bank 2 in Oklahoma City many years ago and is now doing some coaching services. Just a tremendous individual. So thankful for his desire to see us be effective in how we care for others in the calling that God has given us, the sphere of influence that we have. So please take a look at those. We've got some episodes on there that go back many years, and at this point we have 75 episodes, and so please do take a look at that. Use that both in your own study and devotionals and your opportunity to encourage others within your leadership team. Please use it in that way. So take a look at that. It's on any of your podcast platforms. Take a look. You'll find it there. Pathway to Purpose from FCCI. And then, of course, we want to encourage you, please, consider joining us for our conference this year. That's in Lake Tahoe at the Everline Resort, September 15 through 18. We are very excited about the opportunity to once again bring some world-class teachers, trainers, together to provide fantastic information that's going to be of such value. But more important than anything, we believe that the relationships that you build, that time together to help instill in each other and encourage each other in the truth of what it means to truly live and build a company for Christ. And so we want you to be a part of that. Please consider doing it. You'll find information on our website at fcci.org, or go directly to conference.fcci.org, and you can learn more there and register. And one of our sponsors for this year is Blue Trust. We're very thankful for that. We have Gilbert with us here today for our webinar. So Greg, great to have you here. Thanks for being a part of this webinar series and for what you're going to contribute today. Thank you.
Ken, I'm excited to be here. And also, I wanted to make the conference last year, was not able to do so. So I'm thrilled to join all of you out in Lake Tahoe. It's going to be a great time.
It will be a great time. So Greg, you'll be there Sunday, Monday. I know you're going to be heavily involved Sunday as we kick things off. Very thankful for that and the opportunity to hear more from Blue Trust and for folks to learn more about, I believe Russ Crossan is going to be there as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, Russ. Yeah, so we'll be having a session, I believe, on Sunday night, and then also we'll have a lunch available where he and I will discuss family meetings and the importance and power of family meetings. That those can be in families and passing legacy values to following generations.
That's great. It's almost a follow-on to our webinar, which will be great. Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. Good stuff. So love that. So give us a little bit of background here, Greg. How did you get connected with Blue Trust? What's the story there? What's been your journey?
Yeah, well, I originally wanted to be a pilot, an airline pilot, and this was back in high school. And I started taking flying lessons, and I got right up to the solo. And I go, if I make one mistake, right? And I was like, I don't think I want to do this. And so not necessarily looking for a career after that, but just getting involved in personal finance. And my grandparents had kind of been big on stewardship and God's perspective when I started working, cutting yards and working at Chick-fil-A,
Mm,
I started tithing and being
mm,
generous and learning what that habit and that celebration and worship is all about.
mm.
And started listening to a guy on the radio, Gene Hensler, back in the early 90s. And eventually it just
Wow.
connected to me when I was at UGA getting my finance degree, that that's what I wanted to do for a living. That I
Mm,
wanted to kind of give that kind of counsel, that kind of advice
mm,
to others. And so it really kind of clarified there. Didn't know really that much about Ronald Blue or now Blue Trust
mm,
back then. I'd heard the name, I'd heard of Ron Blue, I'd definitely seen a book. But when I started looking for another role in '99, after a couple of years with Hensler, the guy who was basically over our relationship with Schwab, as well as he had a connection to Blue Trust. And he introduced me, and I was blown away by the
mm.
culture. I was blown away by the purpose. I was
Yeah,
blown away by the mission. And so I
that's great.
joined 25 years ago this August. So
Wow.
unbelievable that I've been any one place 25 years because I'm very entrepreneurial. And so to be there, it's just been a lot of development, a lot of people pouring into me, and
Mm.
hopefully I'm able to do the same into others.
That's great. Great. So now you're flying this plane. Any regrets that you didn't pursue being a pilot?
Zero regrets.
That's
No,
great.
I mean, like, listen, pilots are amazing at checklists, right? And you want them to
Oh,
be.
yeah, right, right.
And I know the value of checklists. I'm just a little bit
Mm,
more creative than that. And so checklisting every day would probably would not have been the right direction for me.
that's great. I love it. Well, I know you're in the Atlanta area, right?
I am. Yes.
And
My wife and I are both native.
okay.
Native. Tucker High School, both went to Georgia. And it's rare these days to be in Atlanta and to be native Atlanta. So we love the diversity. We love people from all over joining us in the city.
That's great. Good stuff. And folks, as we move into the presentation, let me just remind you real quick, if you would do submit questions as we go along. We'll take some time at the end to come back and do a little Q&A with Greg. So anything that pops up along the way that you want to pose to Greg, please do that. Make sure you get those questions entered into the chat there, and we'll pull those up at the end and have a chance to do that. So Greg, we'll turn things over to you and let you walk us through what God has put on your heart today and the presentation. And thank you in advance for investing into us today. Thank you.
Yeah, Ken, thanks again for having me and for everyone just being here. I love the idea of the pathway to purpose because I think that's what we're all wanting. We're all looking for God's purpose and his design, whether that's in our relationships, whether that's in our career, whether that's in our business, our leadership, or our money. Right. So I want to talk about that today with a title called Family Money, is where we'll begin with the idea that what are the keys to your family finances as a business owner? Because we have these two competing agendas, it seems like sometimes as a business leader, as a business owner, even if you're running a charity or running a charitable organization, sometimes it seems like your personal finances are needed by the organization. So we're going to talk about that today. Before I dive in, just a little bit about Blue Trust. So here's just a few numbers. We have been around for 45 years, started in 1979. You may be familiar with the name Howard Hendricks. Howard Hendricks essentially had the vision for our company back in the late 70s. He went to Ron and said, Ron, there's all this money in the hands of Christians in North America, and there's all this need for the gospel and for charitable work globally. The money's already here if we can just encourage Christians how to be more generous with what they already have. Number one. And number two, he said, my wife and I don't know how we're doing financially, but I know the scriptures have over 2,000 verses on money and on planning. So, Ron, I think people need help actually applying that. So, we started as a financial planning firm in 1979. We now serve over 10,000 clients. We've got over $52 billion under advisement for our clients, over 400 employees, and we've got over 18 offices. There's a couple more that are on the way across the nation. So on the next slide, you'll see a few of our offices and where those are located. We've got a lot in the Southeast, but even in Seattle, Southern California, just added one in near Silicon Valley. We're adding one in Dallas before too long. We're adding one in Naples before too long. So we're just blessed to see how God has grown us in the last almost 50 years. And a little bit about me, I just kind of shared some, but I've been with the company, as I mentioned, for 25 years. I serve clients, and we really enjoy working with leaders, business owners, business leaders. We also serve collegiate coaches on my team. As a company, we're built to serve anyone, and that's our heartbeat, is coming alongside individuals and couples and bringing God's word into their money and their finances to help them get organized and help them take action. So it's been my pleasure to be here leading our Atlanta office as well as serving clients. So when you think about being a business owner and a business leader, there's already so much going on with your time. I remember a week ago, someone asked, and we were reflecting on our summers about the summer lull. Apparently there's supposed to be a summer lull in our business where things get a little quieter, people are on vacation, and it gets a little bit more calm. And I don't know about you. We definitely took some vacation time. We definitely had people on our team do that. But there were other things coming our way. There were a lot of planning things. There were a lot of things at the middle point of the year that we were looking at for the second half of the year. And it seems like life is only picking up speed. So as a business owner, it's only more complicated. It's a multiplier on your time. It's a multiplier on the things that are on your plate. So it's one of those things we talk to. We say that everyone needs financial help. Everybody is trying to figure out, with whatever it is they have, what does God want me to do with this? The challenge is that with whatever we have, there's always more options than there is money. So then how do we prioritize? How do we bring intentionality to what we have? And what does God's word have to say about how we do that? And if you're a business owner, it can seem like a pot of spaghetti where it's like, I don't know where the business stops and my personal finances begin. I don't know where the boundaries should be. So that can be a major challenge for all of us, and especially multiplied for business owners. So one of the things that we want to look at here are, what are some of the major issues on the next slide that business owners and business leaders face? Here's just 8. We could have kept going, but here's 8 of them. It's a lack of clarity around how the business and the family finances work together, which then says, hey, what are the boundaries that I need to have on my personal finances? For a lot of us, your paycheck may not be every 2 weeks or every month the same. So there can be seasonality, there can be bonuses, there can be distribution, there can be different ways that you receive income that makes it a little bit more of a challenge to figure out how to take care of your expenses with this seasonality or this irregular flow of cash. And then how do you understand what's available for your family? How do you understand what may be available for business and for other deals? And a lot of times, because the business is so heavy, what happens unintentionally is that our family finances or our individual finances take a back seat. So because of that, I've seen things like not being prepared for a tax payment or not being prepared, for a major purchase. And then obviously, if you're married, the communication and alignment is so critical in money in general. And so how do we bring in that when, again, things are just going faster and faster and faster with the speed of leadership? So on the next slide, what I really want to share with you is the 4 keys. I'm going to give you 4 tools today. And the first tool is very foundational. And we as leaders are very familiar with goal setting. This is nothing new to us. However, are you goal setting with your family? Are you goal setting for yourself, if you're not married, individually for your finances? And so we think this is critical, and we think this is one of the key tools that helps create clarity. And if you think about a lot of the issues that are going on in our businesses or on our personal life, sometimes it's just a lack of clarity. Have you ever been in, a hotel room that you're not familiar with in the middle of the night, stumbling around trying to find your way, right? If only the light were turned on, it would be very easy to figure this out. It's amazing how powerful the ability is of being able to see and have concrete direction of where we're going. We certainly believe as believers that the number one way that we do this is we go to God, right? We go to God and say, God, what is it that you would have for me? What is it that you would have for us together if you're married? And that's where it begins. Go to his word. What does his word have to say about this? And pray about what it is that's going to be the top priorities, because we can't do everything. So, God, what is most important? And then go to your spouse. If you're married, go to your spouse and go together to kind of say, hey, what is it that you're thinking about? What's on your heart? What have you been praying about? What's God been revealing to you? And let me share mine as well. And then we can come together around that to create clarity in a direction that we can aim at. So here are a few key areas that you may want to think about for what matters most for your personal finances as a family. Some ideas would be, what's your level of cash reserves and liquidity? Liquidity means how quickly can something be converted to cash. So for example, money out of an ATM, money in your checking account is the quickest way something can be converted to cash. Something that can't be converted to cash usually is your business or a piece of real estate or a private investment in another business. So do you have enough liquidity for your family? And I know it's a very foundational question, but it's also one that as business leaders, there's often an entrepreneurial mindset that wants to see deals everywhere and see opportunity everywhere, sometimes at the expense of the personal finances. Another area that you may want to consider having a goal around is debt pay down. Having debt is not a sin, but God does caution us against the use of debt. And he says that the borrower is servant to the lender, right? So anything that we earn, in part, we're working to pay back someone else for what we have. So we believe strongly in being aggressive towards paying down any debt. The third thing you could maybe have some goals around would be, hey, how much do I need to save? We call it, what's your finish line? How much is enough? And do you know how much is enough for yourself and for your family? Based on that number of how much is enough in your finish line, then there's probably going to be a number that you need to be targeting to save every single year along the way. Also, with that, are you planning with your spouse or for yourself? What are major purchases that are upcoming? Like before the end of 2024, and as we go into 2025, what are some of the expenses and major purchases that we may have coming our way? And again, that can include taxes and education. Fourth, do you have any goals around giving? We love to ask the question, what does generosity look like for you? And if you're a couple, what does it look like for you and your family together? And then dream with God about what that could look like. What's on your heart? What breaks your heart that you want to help speak into in this world based on where God has put you and what's happening around you? And that could also include generosity towards your family, especially as we get older, as we get maybe beyond financially independent and we've taken care of ourselves. And now we see the needs and opportunities to invest in our family in a wise way. That can be something else we want to step into. And then finally, another place you may want to have some goals. Have you taken care of your insurance? When's the last time your wills were updated? And do you know what they say? Do you know what would happen to your money and your wealth and your things if you were to pass away? So that's kind of a quick overview. I want to give you a lot of practical tools today in our short amount of time together. So there's going to be a lot of practical takeaways, I hope, for you in your situation. The next page is just a simple foundational example of goals that we would use with clients. And so to create goals, as we know, they need to be SMART. They need to be specific, measurable, achievable, relatable back to what we want to accomplish, and they need to be time bound and be specific on timing. So if you look at these would be some examples of those. The opportunity to increase your emergency fund. So at age 25, your emergency reserve may be one amount. At 45 or at 65, it probably needs to grow. And is it in an appropriate place for you right now? Increase giving. What are you doing around generosity? Establishing a financial finish line. As we talked about, how much is enough? And do you know what that number is for you and for your family? And an idea that we've started doing with a lot of our families is having a family meeting where you're bringing together generations. And it could be as young as teenagers. It can be, if you're in your 60s or 70s, you might have grown kids and you might have grandkids. And it's an opportunity for you to come together around them and say, hey, here's what God has done in our life. Let me tell you the story of stewardship. Let me tell you the story of how God has shown up. in our lives. And it's also a time for them to understand about your generosity and the story of money and God in your life together. So these are just some examples of the types of goals that you could have. And you'll notice some of them are long term, some of them are short term, and the importance of being able to write it down and clarify it so that you can aim and hit it. So that's kind of goal one. This is kind of tool one. On the next page, I want to introduce you to something that we use a lot. This is called our steps to investing. And I will walk you through the power of what this steps to investing means in thinking about your money. So this would be the second tool I want to give you today. So find yourself on these steps. So the first one would be, how is your debt? We talked about the aggressive nature that we recommend of paying down debt, having a goal for being debt free. But how much debt do you have? Do you have credit card debt? Do you have car debt or automobile debt? Or what's your house and mortgage debt? And how aggressively can you pay those things off? The second would just be having enough cash in your checking account. And why this is important is in a lot of our clients that are business owners, even with great wealth, and what many would consider great wealth, there can be an opportunity or a desire to have things in money in deals. And it's almost like they're allergic to cash. So they want to, like, I have a real estate client and he sees real estate deals everywhere. They have a large rental portfolio. He is a top agent. He started a side company where they do home development with a builder. And so he sees all these opportunities. One year, towards the end of the year, they were surprised by a tax bill. And he just wanted to go ahead and take it out of his home equity line of credit. And his wife said, no, 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 no. What are we doing? Time out, time out, time out. We are not doing that. That is our home. Right. So the way he saw it, he saw everything working together. And she said, no, this is a checking account that I want to make sure I've got enough cash for. This is an emergency reserve. So that if anything happens with all of these deals that we have, some of them are riskier than others. I want to make sure we're going to be okay. And then this is our home. I really want us to work towards being debt free. And now they are debt free on their house. And so planning ahead becomes something super important, even for step number 3, which is an emergency reserve. Step number 4, like we talked about with goal setting, is what are some of the upcoming major purchases and how do we get ahead of those? So for instance, if somebody came to me and said, Greg, I've got $50,000 or $500,000, what should I do with it? How should I invest it? I would go to this chart. I've been doing this for 25 years, so it's natural and normal. So I wouldn't necessarily need the physical chart, but I would say, hey, how's your debt? Okay, your debt's in a good place. All right, well then, hey, how's your emergency reserve? Is that where it needs to be? Okay. Do you have any, step 4, do you have any upcoming major purchases that are going to be happening that you need to be providing for? And then, okay, if all of those things are taken care of, now we can go to step 5 and actually invest for the long term. Now we can have a conversation around investing wisely. During the tech bubble, it was the reverse. It was almost the natural way of humans, right? In a fallen world, does this all in reverse. So they would jump to step 6, which was speculation. At the same time, they had debt. At the same time, they might not have had an emergency reserve. At the same time, they might not have been saving for upcoming major purchases, but yet they were speculating. And then later on to potentially their downfall for a lot of people during the tech bubble of 2000 through 2003. So we want to be wise. So this is steps to investing. So if you're a business owner, kind of walk this through. We're going to provide these tools to you following today's webinar, and use this with you and your spouse. And if you're an individual, just look at this, kind of go, where am I? And then therefore, what's the next step as I look forward? Behind the steps to investing is a simple idea called the net worth. So this will be our third tool today. Our third tool is the net worth. And you may go, wow, this is a lot of numbers. Okay, well, you know what? This is a very practical tool for you and yourself or you and your spouse to use to come together. And all it does is on the left side under assets, it tells you here's everything that you own. On the right side, under liabilities and debt, this is everything that you owe. So it's just net worth is a summary of everything that you own and everything that you owe. And it also represents kind of a snapshot in time of all of the previous decisions financially that you've made. So if you bought a car and haven't sold it, it's on your net worth. If you bought a house previously and own it, it's on your net worth. If you took out debt and then haven't paid it off, it's still on your net worth. So it's a representation of all of the sum of all of your financial decisions made to this point. Why it's powerful is because now we can see that everything on here should have a very specific purpose. So, and also, if we notice at the top, checking, well, what is that? Well, that's to pay our bills. Savings and emergency fund, what is that? Well, that's obviously going to be for anything that happens along the way, right? Unexpected. We already talked about that, but we're working away from liquid down to non-liquid, meaning cash ready could be converted to cash to, you know what, it's going to take a little bit longer down the road, down this list for it to be converted to cash. But there should be a purpose for everything. So we go to liquid. You see here, we've got somebody maybe has a Blue Trusted Individual account. So you could have an investment account of some kind wherever you have it. You could also have a joint account, which with your spouse. You also could have some insurance cash value. And this is just where we would represent, those assets. Moving down, you got retirement, and then you've got business, and then you've got personal. What we find is a lot of business owners will have a lot more in the business and non-liquid categories. And that may or may not be a problem, but it could be a problem if you don't have much cash and you don't have much liquidity and you have a lot of expenses coming up and you don't have the ability to access that capital for that. We were working recently with a client, and he and his wife they're both in the late 60s, and he has done really, really well, but it has not been a straight line up, right? A lot of our lives, we want to be straight lines, but they're usually a little bit more like this on the way up. And she was very uncomfortable with a lot of the investments that he had been making over the years, because while some of them had done well, she had been faced in a number of times when the optimism that he had was not always seen through fruition in terms of the investments that he made. And so she had been burned in a sense. She was nervous about having enough cash. She was nervous about, their home being provided for. And so even though they were doing really, really well, she wanted to make sure they had enough cash, they had enough liquidity in their financial situation, and also wanted to make sure that they were paying down debt as quickly as they could. So the net worth, if you don't know what your net worth is, you need to know. I would say as a steward, that would be wise for you to know. Psalm 27:37 says, know the conditions of your flocks, right? And so this is a key tool number 3. Key tool number 4, as we move along, will be what we call our 5 uses of money. So it's our 5 uses of money is the next tool. And we believe that this is done in a biblical manner. And it starts with generosity and just going to God and saying, God, what are you calling me to do with what you've given me? Right? You make that decision, and it's of the first fruits of all of our crops. The second would be living expenses or lifestyle. So how much is God calling you to provide for your family, to enjoy the lifestyle that he's given you? You'll see taxes there. We want to render unto Caesar whatever is Caesar's. Now, obviously, we want you to be wise. We want to take care of whatever we can realistically and authentically to reduce our taxes to whatever we can. But at some point, you're going to need to pay taxes. Then there's debt pay down, and the amount of debt that you have to pay that down. And we pay everyone what we owe them. And so we want to be committed to doing that well. And the fifth is really what we call savings or margin. A couple of weeks ago, my daughter was on a Sunday morning, and she lives with her new husband. And I was asking her, what's going on for the day? And she said, well, we're just going to church. And then after that, we don't really have any plans. And I was like, that's pretty nice, isn't it? That you are looking forward to the day ahead and you really don't have any plans. And that means margin, right? And so margin with our time or margin with our money. If your time is fully booked up, then you won't feel freedom with what you have. If your money is fully booked up and already committed or even overcommitted, then you won't feel freedom and you won't feel financial freedom, because you can have financial freedom at any income level. So we give, we pay our taxes, we have pay our debt, and then the last two decisions are between savings and lifestyle. And the fourth tool is extended onto this next tool that we call our cash flow. And so it's a lot of small numbers on here, but you don't need to see it. The reason why we do this, which is just money in and money out. So money coming in. So what is our income going to be? And do you know what that should be for 2024? Do you know what it should be for 2025? And then below is where we represent our 5 uses of money. So if you look on there, you can see living expenses, you can see liabilities, which is debt, you can see generosity and charitable giving, you can see taxes, but then there's some other things like major purchases and margin that are listed there as well. So we think everybody should know what money's coming in, what money's coming out. Now, on this slide, you'll see it's done over 5 years, because we believe that it's not just about what's happening in 1 year, but it's also having visibility and awareness of what's happening in the years to come. So do you know for yourself what's in your giving bucket? Do you know for yourself and your family what's in your tax bucket? Do you know for you and yourself what's in your debt bucket? And do you know what your lifestyle is and what your margin is that you're targeting? So if we had a financial finish line, if we knew how much is enough, then this is part of what we would want to be reflected in our cash flow, is the fact that we can actually hit our targets for saving, and not only this year, but also in years to come. I cannot emphasize how powerful it is, and they're fundamental tools, but I can't overemphasize how powerful it is to have spouses coming together in alignment around direction, around what we have and where it's going, around what's on our net worth, what do we own, what do we owe, and what's the purpose for everything that's on our net worth, and also for cash flow. Do we know what money's coming in? Do we know what money's going out? Obviously they say over and over again that money is one of the biggest stressors in marriage. And imagine, driving down a dark road in deep fog in the dark of night and having low visibility as you're trying to make wise decisions on the roadway. Like, how do you feel, right? You're probably confused, maybe a little bit nervous, maybe terrified. And so the power of just having the awareness and knowing what you have, we believe, is the way that God would want us to do. In Luke 14:28, he says, but who's going to build a tower if they wouldn't first sit down and estimate the cost? And we believe that, Ephesians 5:15 through 17 is one of my favorite verses, which is, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, for the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. And as believers, we know that Psalm 24:1 is, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So everything that we're talking about today is God's, right? So when we're generous to God for what he's already given us. And when we're living out with purpose on what he's given us, then we're just following the call of God on our lives to be a vessel to the world around us. So if you turn to the next slide, just wanted to see how it all ties together, right? And so we talked about short-term plans. Do you know what yours are? Long-term plans, having a financial finish line, how much is enough? How's that reflected in your cash flow? Estate and insurance, making sure that those important items have been updated for you and for your family. And then there's life planning. One of the things that we found with planning is that the value is not so much in the plan as it is in the planning, that it rises up the priorities of what's most important and what matters most in terms of what God has called us to. And so that when life changes, because it will change, it will shift from whatever we expected. And the way I like to think about it is, my plan looking forward is plan A. And then when something happens differently, that's plan B, and that's God's plan. and God's plan is better than my plan. Obviously, my plan, hopefully, is considering God and considering his ways and considering what he's up to. But as I've experienced in life, and I'm sure you have as well, often life happens differently than we expect. And so when that does happen, I like to go, God, what are you up to? I'm grateful for that. But I've also gone through the planning process of thinking about what God has called us to and how we want to live that out in our lives. So then when life planning does happen, we've already been spending a lot of time thinking about the intentionality with the purpose of what God has called us to. So we feel like this is how all these things kind of fit together. One of the things I'd encourage you is to figure out who's on your financial team, and on the next slide, kind of show you how we like to think about it. You need a great accountant. You need a great attorney. Who's helping you with generosity? Who's helping you with insurance? You probably have a lending and banking expert, and there may be others on your financial team. But if you think about your financial team, you're in the middle of all of your financial team. One of the things we try to help with clients is we try to help be their financial quarterback, go deeply with them, work with all of their experts in one direction and get everybody on the same page. So that's something that we love doing for clients and how we work. But some people don't need that. Some people are awesome just being in the center of all of that with their team, and making things happen, themselves in more of a do-it-yourself mode, which is great as well. The last slide is just a contact slide. And I just want to encourage you that, Psalm 127:1 says, unless the Lord builds the house, he labors in vain. So unless the Lord builds the house, we labor in vain. And so no matter where you are on this journey, we're on the same place. We're all with FCCI in the same place of trying to figure out how God has purposed our lives, what he's calling us to, and then how do we use our time, talent, and treasure, right, to honor him and glorify him with what we have, because it's all his, as we said in Psalm 24:1. So hopefully these 4 tools will be a very practical encouragement to you. They're going to be shared with FCCI Network, so be on the lookout for those. If you want to look at those and want to use those, I would encourage you to. And many of you may already have some of these things figured out, and maybe this is just a refresher to kind of go back to it. It's an ongoing process year after year of saying, God, what are you up to? What would you have for me to do generously this year? How can we bless others? What are you calling for us to do as a family this year? And ultimately, this is the way that you go to God and say, I just want our lives to be about what matters most, according to his word and his direction with the Holy Spirit. So thanks for having me today, Ken.
Oh, this is great.
Pleasure. And so now we can open it up for any questions that may be
That's
out
great.
there.
Thank you very much. And yeah, folks, please do feel free to submit questions. Rachel Creek, I see that you submitted a question. We'll jump to that in just a moment. But as you were mentioning, you were talking about, in order to build the house, we must have a great foundation. We got to lay a great plan. So I got a couple questions, just some practical things, Greg, as we step into this. I know sometimes it's really hard to get into these conversations when the money's not there, right?
Sure.
So talk to us about just maybe some of the practical strategies of how do I have those conversations in advance and move into and to be confident in that planning, maybe even before we say, well, the finances aren't there yet, so I don't need to have that conversation. But we really kind of need to, right? We got to lay the foundation here.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the key principles is with financial planning is necessary because there's always more choices than there is money. And what I've actually seen is if somebody's at $50,000, there's a certain number of choices of income. There's a certain number of choices they may be making. But when it gets to 150 or 200, it's almost like the choices expand at a faster rate than the money has. Maybe people are going to private school more. Maybe people are thinking about second homes. Maybe the cars, maybe the homes, maybe the vacations are expanding at a faster rate. And so it actually never goes away.
Yeah.
So the same lessons that I was learning and giving when I was cutting yards and paying for my
Same.
first car and paying back my uncle who I bought his car from, so it's the same. And I went up and spoke, had a pleasure of speaking at Liberty. They've got a great financial planning curriculum, courses, and great leaders there. And there's a gentleman that came up to me after one of the classes and said, "Hey, I've got $20,000. How should I invest this?" Right? Well, I went back to the steps to investing. I was like, well, do you have any debt? that's going on out there that you need to take care of? How's your emergency reserve?
Hmm.
And if you're thinking, what would a college student need for emergency reserve? Well, my son wrecked his car over the Christmas break, and it was a few $1,000s. So there's reasons. Major purchases or anything you
Hmm.
want to be saving for. I don't know what year he was in his school, but is he saving for a car? Is he saving maybe for an engagement ring? Is he saving for down payment for a house or something else? So these principles apply to all of us,
Hmm.
Ken. So I appreciate your question. It's no
Hmm.
matter what we have, it's how do we honor God with it in the principles of taking what we have and just saying, I like to use the word spending plan rather than budget because to me,
Yeah.
budget seems restrictive. But spending plan is I want it to go to the things that matter most to me according to what God has called.
Hmm. Hmm. That's great. Well, let me just pop up this question here from Rachel, and we'll dig into that. So her husband's self-employed business owner. So just describing the difference there between a tax strategist. You talked about tax planning a little bit and wealth management. So maybe speak into
Yes.
that.
Yes. Well, Ron Blue was a CPA, so we have a lot of CPAs on our firm. I am not one of them. So I would say, a wealth manager is someone that helps you do financial planning and investment management. We tell our clients those are the two things that people pay us to do. However, we do provide tax guidance and tax ideas. And however, for a business owner, self-employed, we would say you need a really good CPA.
Hmm.
So you need somebody that's going to make sure you're getting the deductions you need to get. You're going to need somebody to file your returns and sign off on your returns. So if you ever get audited, their name is
Hmm.
there, and that's part of the power of them signing your returns is they're standing behind your returns, and they'll help you through that audit. So yeah, we love working with the CPAs, and we look out and try to think about ideas that can impact business owners. But the CPAs are the deep experts, and we love partnering with them to serve clients.
That's great. And I wanted to mention because you'd mentioned the idea of, well, how much is enough? And
Mm.
so there's always that question. And so thanks for teeing this one up for me, Greg. But our Pathway to Purpose podcast, if you go to episode 65 and episode 66, it's actually Ronald Blue teaching, and his subject was how much is enough, and he was teaching at an FCCI conference. So if that question is when you go, I don't know, how do I define that? Well, there you go. There's a great resource for you, the Pathway to Purpose podcast, episode 65 and 66. But maybe just speak to that a little bit. Just how do we kind of get to that really clarity around how much is enough?
Well, I think the human answer is just a little bit more.
Right.
Always.
Always.
Well, just a little bit more. Whatever's a little bit more. Whatever I have, all right, I just need a little bit more. Then I'll be happy. Then I'll be content, right? And we know that doesn't happen that way.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, I think as believers, we're just we're being faithful
Hmm.
with what we have,
Yeah.
where we are, and that's the magic. Honestly, it's like God, am I being faithful with the relationships I have? Right. The big idea of stewardship is it's not just about money; it's about the whole of our lives. FCCI is like, okay, we're coming together as believers. We have these companies, but right, I mean, FCCI is we would like to say we go beyond the money into the other areas of life. So how are you as
Sure.
a leader and a steward? I mean, are you being faithful as a leader? Are you being faithful in your relationships? Are you being faithful as
Yeah.
a parent? Faithful, with the money that you have,
Hmm.
faithful with the income, faithful on the job, doing your work heartily unto the Lord rather than men. And knowing, we say three things about money. It's a tool, it's a test,
Hmm.
and it's a testimony. So it's a tool to accomplish God's will in our lives.
That's
It's a
good.
test that God is kind of saying, all right, hey, parable of talents, I'm giving you something. What are you doing with what I've given you? And then what we do with it is a light to those who come in contact with it and that are blessed by our generosity in whatever way beyond just writing checks, right? That can be one, but Jesus, I don't know how many checks he wrote, but I'm sure he was generous. So then, okay, how was he generous? Right? The generosity of Jesus. So it's just being faithful, I think, at the end with what we have and where we are. And if we can't save and give, when we're 22, what's going to change by the time we're 32 or 42? Because the income will
Hmm.
go up, but the choices will expand more quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I am very grateful for all of these tools that you've provided today. And as you mentioned, we will send out an email following the webinar here today, and so it will include a PDF with this information. So, folks, you'll have that. Anything else, Greg, that you wanted to mention before we wrap up? Maybe even just a touch point as we head toward the conference, and like we said, a little bit of a follow on as if folks are able to join us there in Lake Tahoe. But we're excited about that.
Yeah, I think it's a big part of, we did a recent business leaders event last week in Atlanta for some of our clients and friends and partners. And it was, what matters most? How do you discover, define, and measure? And I think what I shared today was just, the goal setting is going to God. I mean, it's going to his word, it's going to him, and he's giving us direction based on the particulars of where we are. But then we can track it through tracking the goals that we have. And then we can track it through seeing what he's given us and seeing how we're doing with it, and seeing what needs to be paid attention to. So I think it's one of those things in life, and sometimes the hardest things to measure in life are, like for our business, we talk about our mission. Well, our mission is helping to give money away to kingdom. It's helping to impact marriages. It's helping to impact legacy.
Yeah,
How do
sure.
you measure that? It's kind of hard. So we celebrate stories,
Yeah.
right? So something I was convicted about through Dennis and Barbara Rainey is, they've captured their family story in a book called Our Story. And, I was like, am I and are we, my wife Lisa, and are we capturing the story of what God has done
Yeah.
in our life, in our marriage? Because it's so easy in the moment that to experience something that's so challenging that we don't know how it's going to turn out, and then it turns out a certain way, and we see God's hand in it,
Mm-hmm.
and then we forget to share that story with others. So, are we sharing the story as we discover and define and measure what God is up to in our lives and in our businesses and in all the areas of stewardship that we have before Him?
Such a huge piece of generosity right there. Sharing the story, of all the things we can do, the impact that we can have to just pass that on and say, no, God is alive and working and active, and here's how I can show you right here in my family. That's powerful. I love that.
Absolutely.
Well, Greg, thank you so much. Looking forward to being together in Lake Tahoe, and thank you for sharing with us today. And we'll continue to be praying for God to just work mightily and powerfully through your entire team, and just so thankful for the work that you're doing as you interface with so many around the country. So thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Ken, and I will look forward. Was it episode 66 and 62? Is that what they were with Ron Blue?
65 and 6. Yeah. Take a
Okay,
look.
65 and 6.
Yeah.
All
Take a
right.
look. Yeah. It's good stuff.
Ron is over
As
80,
you know.
not slowing down, and God continues to use him. And, I stand on his shoulders. I've learned so much from he and Russ and so many that came before me. And
Sure.
so it's awesome that he's still going the way that he is. So I'll look forward to looking back at those
awesome.
episodes.
That's great stuff. Well, thank you. And folks, will look forward to being together. Just so you're aware, this next month, we are not going to be having a webinar because of the conference there in Lake Tahoe. So if you can join us, great. Otherwise, we'll look forward to being together again in October for another Pathway to Purpose webinar. So until then, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you then. Take care.
Take care.